A pleasure to me all at last. And now, why don't we go on ahead and do a little more horror or thriller related stuff for films I should have talked about years ago. In this instance, I happened to come upon another free film for YouTube, as I am apparently that good of a subscriber on YouTube Premium. But what I came across was a Sam Raimi film from 2012 that I actually remembered seeing the trailer for a long time ago. The Possession. This, of course, was basically a little while after Sam Raimi ended the trilogy of Spider-Man, which, of course, was responsible for making Tobey Maguire, James Franco, Willem Dafoe, and many other actors quite famous. But in this instance, this was a little while after Spider-Man 3 came out. And coincidentally, the same year that The Amazing Spider-Man, which was a Sony Marvel reboot that came out the same year in 2012, was also released. And so, The Possession is something that Sam Raimi went ahead and did that's more original, but is actually based on a true story that happened. Because, unlike with most possession or exorcist related films, which focused on the more Christian oriented possessions that are associated with the underworld, this one actually focuses on something that's more Judaism related. Yeah, so good shout out to anybody that I remember well whom was in fact of Jewish relation. So I kind of forgot the saying for that, but the mutualness is still in place. But either way you look at it though, The Possession is something I recently gave another watch to, as I did see it one other time. Not exactly counting the trailer, because that was an entirely different thing. But I did see it some years after it came out, and now I went ahead and saw it again. What I can say is that it still holds on insanely well. For one thing, we could talk a bit about how the unbelievable acting of Natasha Callis was done. Yeah, think about it. Natasha Callis right now is my age, 26 years old, but at around 13 years old that she was able to pull this stuff off. That alone really says something. But then again, we could probably talk a bit about the plot. The plot first starts off with a certain woman and a certain box in a certain room. And what happens is that while the scene sets up as a bit more quiet and peaceful at first, we unfortunately are contended with some horrifying scenery. I mean, first this woman is being tossed around the room and then contorts into some weird positions, like yoga on steroids, and then is basically slaughtered right in front of us. Her son happens to be outside the house and lets himself in to find his mother dead. So, if that does not creep you out or disturb you, then oh boy, we're only getting started here. Because some basketball games and the coach, whom is by the name of Clyde, he eventually gets back to his home, upon which that his two daughters, Hannah and Emily, are basically moving out to a new home. A new home that they take a partaking to. And while Em is basically much more enthusiastic about it than Hannah is, it's fair to say that this kind of well-behaved and happy behavior from Em won't last too long, because I'll get into that pretty soon. But in any other case though, some time does pass before they come across a yard sale where they find a strange box. And while Em is more than excited about the many things and is really attached to her father, Hannah especially does have a more distant and somewhat contempt set of behavior towards her father. So you'd probably think that with the kind of feeling she has towards her father and the rest of the family, even being rather honest, like the fact that the divorce is leading up to a number of problems in their life, like I said, between both Em and Hannah's personalities, you'd be surprised as to which of the two daughters of Clyde end up in a certain predicament later on in the film. Either way though, what we do find is that this box that they pick up from the yard sale is opened at some point. A moth ends up entering the room, and Hannah and Em are both freaked out by this whole thing. Even though Clyde manages to kill it, Hannah wanted it out instead. So, kind of more of a reason for her to start being negative towards her own dad, the very dad that is literally protecting her from who knows what's going on out there. But then what we eventually find is that M is starting to develop a bit of a change in her personality. She was rather happy, carefree, and maybe a little naive as to what was going on. But this box that she got a hold of was more than just some article of history. A possible keepsake bin worth of things inside. But the secrets are truly dark. Like, so dark. Anyways, though, while it is true that Clyde and his former wife, Stephanie, are indeed in a divorced matter, of course, this new partner of hers is basically at their own house, upon which we do transition back and forth between Clyde's home and Stephanie's home from time to time, but they do become a lot more important later on. Since M, believe it or not, ends up going through a number of things. It gets to a point where she starts keeping the box with her, almost like it's some sort of drug that she's trying to keep close by for comfort. A student of hers in her class ends up trying to take the box, and she gets in a really violent fight with him, getting her sent straight to the principal's, and her parents and the administrators do talk things out. The box seemingly is the problem at hand, but some would believe differently. It really escalates to the point where M is without her box, most likely because they had it confiscated at school. It boils to the point in which that M starts to get in a fight with Clyde, and suddenly something slaps her repeatedly, and because Clyde was standing right in front of her, she's led to believe that it was him who did it. And Hannah, of course, was no help because she wasn't even there, but when she did show up, they were both made to think that Clyde is now straight up abusing M over these problems that she's been having. And that is really one hell of a way to drive things up. I mean, on top of these new feelings that M's experiencing and all these new problems she's been having, there's this fabrication of Clyde just committing straight up child abuse. But who really believes in his case on this? Because even Stephanie is insanely pissed about it. In fact, they all go to court, and Clyde is basically no longer to have custody of the two daughters. They all go to Stephanie's instead, and basically he is without his daughters at this point. Stephanie, of course, does what she can to prevent him from ever coming back, but he does anyways. But that is, of course, after he does a lot of research on what was going on, figuring out that the box is of Jewish correlation, since he did visit a professor at a college, whom explained to him that it was, in fact, of Jewish religion, an effort to keep evil spirits locked away. And while he was able to get up to M's room at Stephanie's house while she was away, even Hannah wasn't really happy about him just suddenly showing up out of nowhere. But Clyde is the man with the plan. So he goes up, tries to recite Jewish inscriptions, and while it only worked so well, with Stephanie eventually showing up to immediately give him the boot, he decides to go and visit a synagogue, where, in New York, he is able to come across a few rabbis inside. And this group, of course, does include the likes of a rather young rabbi's son, whom, of course, is there to thankfully help him out. And while most of the rabbis walk away, which is actually a pretty nice little detail here, on top of that, most of them are actual Jewish traditionalists, which by Sam Raimi standards is actually pretty good. I do appreciate the kind of attention to detail that they bring along in a film like this. But, of course, these two men would end up going to a hospital after Stephanie finds out that M, in fact, is experiencing a possession. An MRI actually shows probably the most disturbing thing about this entire film, because the pictures are taken of M, her entire body, her entire brain, And her torso shot especially shows something really abnormal. The face of this spirit is inside her right lung, looking at the camera. Holy crap. That is unbelievably creepy. Like, and for 2012, you really would think it would be a lot more tame compared to what we got today, but apparently, oh, Sam Raimi thought of everything at this point. He really knew how to put on a creep show when we least expect it, especially knowing how he did with The Evil Dead and Darkman. But too bad there's not much comedy going on in The Possession, because it just goes straight for the creeps. Kind of like how Evil Dead was the first time around in 1981. About 30 years prior, so to speak. Anyways, though, because the rabbi and Clyde are able to make it to the hospital room, they're able to utilize a physical fitness center in the hospital that thankfully is not in usage or unoccupied, which would have led to them getting in trouble. Of course, being that they had to escort M out of her room in the hospital probably is already a violation in and of itself. Anyways, though, the rabbi does have the family set up everything, including candles and some keepsakes of theirs to put alongside back into the box, because this piece of essence from every member of the family is going to help rid M of her hellish containment. This deity, evil spirit if you will, he is simply known by the name of Azuzu. This Azuzu is not one to be messed around with. I mean, he's considered the taker of children, according to the rabbi's own statements. But while he starts reciting his things in his own Jewish tongue, Clyde, of course, follows up with more things from the Jewish Bible. And while this almost ends in vain with M starting to attack them, at least Azuzu's part, where he starts to attack them, they are eventually able to get Azuzu out of M's body. And Clyde, unfortunately, becomes infected as well. Just think about it. That chase scene that led to a morgue room where the two basically meet and then eventually return to the rec room. It really is quite stunning to say the least. And a little too quiet for comfort. Because by the time we actually see Azuzu outside of Clyde's body, it is incredibly creepy. Like, that's really one way to produce a unique effect. But anyways, Azuzu is able to climb back into the box, where it is then sealed again. And while the rabbi does, in fact, take the box with him, as well as Clyde's car, which, that's too nice of a BMW by 2012 standards to ever let a rabbi own. Because, shockingly enough, while the rabbi is able to take both these items with him and drive off, where hopefully the box can never be opened again, a truck driver comes out of nowhere and slams into him from the side. Holy crap. And if that's not enough, well, the box seems to be opening again, pretty much giving us the possibility of a sequel. Now, I don't know much about a sequel to The Possession, but I wouldn't be that surprised if there was, because that is how incredible this film is. So, all in all, Sam Raimi pretty much nailed it. And it's no wonder why I consider this to be probably his best film ever made. And when you think about it, though, with all the films he's done so far, all the franchises that he started with Evil Dead, Darkman, Spider-Man, and many others along the way, it's clear that he will be around for a good long time. And I hope it does remain that way for many years. Maybe we ought to see him again here in the later half of the slobbering 20s. But that's probably something else for another day. I give my score to The Possession a unique 8.9 out of 10.1, conclusifying the fact that out of all the ones I've given ratings to, this is probably one of his highest of all the works. And I've talked about the Darkman trilogy, as well as some of the Spider-Man trilogy, plus a few other hits here and there. I haven't really spoken much about the Evil Dead, but that's probably another topic I'll save for another day. So in any case though, this is Just another piece of thriller and horror that I'm glad I revisited after some time, just to make a video about. So that's pretty much it for this piece. I'll be back tomorrow, though, with another segment of films I should have talked about years ago.